What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. After Sound here, bringing you Splinterlands content every single day. We also stream right here in this channel every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday morning, so come by and say hello. All right, guys, well, we have the building details. So this is part 3 of the Land 2.0 white paper reveal. So this is going to be exciting. There's it's quite hefty. I'm obviously not going to read the entire thing to you. It says it's an 11-minute read here, but I wouldn't be surprised if we go beyond that because I'll be stopping along the way just to discuss stuff that I find interesting and give a little color commentary. So here we go. Part 3, which does a deep dive into the buildings. And it says, be sure to stay tuned for part 4 later this week, which will cover some of the other mechanics of the land expansion, such as storage, internal markets, and the desalinization process. Now, I don't know if part 4 is going to be the final one. I wonder if there's going to be a part 5. But either way, we're probably more than halfway at this point. So, excuse me, let's go ahead and jump in. There's going to be a list of buildings. All right, so there's 3 types of buildings available. You can do resource production, resource refinement, or resource storage. We're going to jump into each of those. Constructing a building will require a specified amount of resources as well as DEC/voucher. So there's some more voucher utility, although I don't really like it taking away from DEC at this point, but whatever, we'll take it. Will require a specified amount of production to complete by the worker cards. Now, here's an important part. Only the base production of worker cards on a land plot will apply for production. Boosts such as titles, totems, and Rooney will have no effect on the construction production. So you'll have to use time crystals, or you can use time crystals to speed those up. So just something interesting there as we move forward. Additionally, each building will be able to be upgraded to 10 levels unless otherwise specified. Upgrading a building will work the same as constructing a new building. And it looks like, well, they don't mention it here, but we'll find out later that there's going to be maintenance required. Time crystals will be able to be spent to speed up building upgrades at the normal rate. Buildings will not produce any resources while they are in the process of being upgraded. So here we go. Resource production. This is at the base level, right? Production, refinement, and then storage. So buildings may only be constructed on land plots which contain the appropriate resources. So for example, mines can only be constructed on mountains, badlands, caldera. Similarly, a soul extractor can only be built on a magical land plot that contains reclaimed souls, and an outpost can only be put on an occupied plot. So we're going to jump into the little chart that they have here. All resource production buildings also contain a relatively small amount of storage space for food resources as well. So that we're getting into the storage later. All resource production buildings will have a total of 10 different levels, and as they level up, the amount of resources produced per unit of production increases along with the amount of storage space provided. So in the case of the mine building, there's also increased chances of finding higher rarity ores at higher levels. So all resource production buildings will require worker cards to operate. The amount of resources produced per unit will be affected by these factors. So the production of each, the level of the building, the rarity of the land plot, and then your boosts, titles, and totems. So keep in mind, when you're producing resources, all of the boosts from titles, totems, Rooney still come in. But if you are building a building or upgrading a building, then these boosts don't count towards that. So here you go. This is not something that I want to spend too much time on because it's going to be very specific to you. But for example, you can see all of the different types of land plots available, right? Plains, river, bog, lake. These will each produce at the base level grain, right? And you can build a farm on them. Similarly, you can do swamp, forest, tundra, jungle. This is probably where I'm at with a forest and a jungle that will create wood. They got really cool names here, especially once you get into the magical, right? So like magical life is Sky Nimbus is the name of the building. Botanical gardens for earth, spark mine for fire, and then of course outpost for the occupied plots. So, this is going to be very unique, very specific. There's a lot of different options here, and I'll get into more of that later. So, resource refinement. Okay, so now the second type of building that you can build, and keep in mind, I don't know if I probably skipped over it. You can only build one building, right? One building may be constructed on each player-owned land plot within the continent, right? So the plot owner has to choose what they want to build, and then, slowly upgrade it over time. All right, so let's jump back down to resource refinement. So the refinement buildings can be built on any land plot except for those with a keep or castle. Let's see here. So All resource refinement buildings also include a relatively small amount of storage. Okay, so same thing. We're going to have to deal with storage later. That's the third part. Resource refinement buildings have a total of 10 different levels, and as they level up, the efficiency of resource refinement process increases along with the amount of storage space. So you do get more storage as well as better efficiency as you go up. In the case of the foundry, higher levels will unlock higher rarity ores, or the ability to refine higher rarity ores, and the lapidary building will have higher chances of producing higher quality gemstones. So let's see, all resource. Okay, so this is what's going to be required. So the production of the worker cards, the level of the building, and then boosts such as titles, totems, and runies. So what's missing from the first one? The rarity of the land plot. So the rarity of the land plot does not matter for refinement buildings, or I believe storage buildings. But like I said, we'll get to storage in a minute here. So you can see that you can build like a mill, right? Actually, here's the interesting thing. So can be built on resource refinement buildings can be built on any land plot, right? I just want to come back to that for a second. Obviously, with the exception of castles and keeps. So already what we're starting to get to, and you'll see this with storage as well, all those like cheap land plots that are, all the tundras that everybody was sleeping on for a bit. I mean, they're going to have a usage here because maybe you don't care about the resource, but you will want or need a cheap land plot to refine your resource. So for example, I have two plots, a jungle and a forest. And as it stands right now, I will need, let's see. So I will need, I'll have a couple of choices here. I will either need to just produce the raw resources, right, which would be wood from each of those, and not worry about the refinement process, or I could have like one produce wood and then refine it on the other side. That's the decision that I'll need to make. Now, I don't have a third for storage, but that's that'll be a problem that I'll have to grapple with. So you can see here, outputs are the building type, what you put into it, elemental foods. Now, keep in mind, the plot doesn't matter, the plot type, nor does the rarity. And I think as long as you're in the same region, you should be okay. So, this is definitely going to start eating up a lot of those random plots out there that people, don't necessarily need or see. But there's going to be another added aspect to that, which I'll get to in a second. So now let's go to resource storage. Resource storage buildings can be built on any land plot, so similar to the refinement, except for castles and keeps, and they provide a significant amount of storage for the specified resource. Now, for buildings that allow storage, let's see, all storage buildings will also contain a relatively small amount of storage space for food and resources, which will be consumed by the worker cards, and for elixir, which can be earned by providing liquidity on the internal market. So see, now I'm in a little bit of an issue here because I will need to figure out I want to provide liquidity. So if I'm not able to get the elixir from providing liquidity because I don't have a storage unit, well, maybe I don't even bother like mining resources. Maybe I just go heavy on the LPs and I get elixir, right? So what's odd here is that it says all resource storage building will also contain a relatively small amount of storage space for food resource. Oh, it's just for food resources. So similar to the other ones, and then a space for elixir. So for example, let's see, each unit of iron stored in a metal silo. Oh, let's go back up here. For example, metal silo, which can store all different types of ores and metal. Each unit of different resources may require a different amount of storage space. So with iron, right, each unit of iron, it can be I think refined into different types, or there's different types or rarities, right? So the higher the rarity, so even though iron may be physically larger than mithril, the more rare resources may require more specialized storage areas, so therefore they'll require more space technically in the digital realm. So similarly, refined resources will typically take up more storage space than unrefined resources. So that's just across the board. So all resource storage buildings will require worker cards to operate. So you'll still need workers on there. The amount of resources that can be stored will be affected by production, level of building, and boost titles, totems, runies. So once again, rarity of the plot doesn't matter. This is going to eat up a ton of common plots that nobody wants anything to do with. So here's all the different building names and types. Again, I'm not going to read through all of them. Some of them have like fun names, right? So Sanctuary, Metal Silo, Elixir Vat, right? Salt Barn. So these are the different types of buildings that you can store these specific resources. So like a granary, for example, can store grain and elemental foods. A lumber yard will do wood and lumber. And then I guess you'll need, I guess Man, so this is gonna be interesting. Maybe I just get like, I don't even know. We'll have to wait and see. I'll figure out like my plan for this. All right, so let's jump into maintenance. Maintenance, repurposing, and castles and keeps. So maintenance. So every building, unless otherwise specified, will require resources to be expanded to be expended to maintain the building at its current level on a monthly basis. The maintenance cost will be a small percentage of the same resources required to upgrade the building. So that's an interesting point there. It's just going to be a small percentage of the same resources upgraded to, same resources required to upgrade the building. So I guess it's not the resources that you have in there. Let's say there's going to be resources required. I'm assuming like wood or stone or iron, things like that. You will need to have a little bit of that each month in order to keep it going. Now, I wonder if you'll be able to use time crystals or just burn DEC directly rather than having to go through the LPs. But if the requirement is that you have to go through the LPs, that makes the LPs way more valuable because they're taking 10% as a fee and paying it out, on the back end for elixirs and all that. So I don't know. That's going to be an interesting thing. Let's see. The maintenance cost for a building can be paid at any time and even can be paid for multiple months at one time. However, if the full maintenance cost for a building has not been paid by the end of the month, then the building will drop down one level. So when a building is upgraded to a new level or when it's first constructed, the maintenance cost for the first month will be part of the construction. So maintenance only begins in the second month after the building is constructed or upgraded. And I guess this is going to be something that's not going to be on a calendar month, right? Like if you build it on the 14th, it sounds like, it'll start decaying maybe on like the 14th of the next month. And then you'll need, you'll have essentially 30 to 60 days to pay that maintenance cost and keep it there. Please keep in mind, however, maintenance costs will increase each time the building is upgraded. So it is planned that maintenance costs for buildings will be proportional to how productive it was in the previous month. So that means a building that had 100,000 production on average for a month will have a higher maintenance cost the following month than the same building with 10K production. So the more productive you are, this is kind of like a tax on it, right? The more productive you are, the more you are charged. If you're not doing much, it's not like a base level that everybody has to deal with. It's going to be very unique to your situation. Well, not even your situation. It's going to be very unique to the plot's situation and what they did last month and what they'll owe essentially in like taxes, right? But hopefully all that stuff is just going to end up getting burned, which is great. So repurposing buildings. So the fact there's such a diverse array of different buildings and resources allows players to maximize their earning potential of their Praetorian business by finding and filling different niches. So what I was saying before, right, where all of a sudden, let's say all the tundras get used up as storage or as refinement buildings, and then you realize that whatever the tundras produce, which is, I don't even know, let's go back up here, tundra, like logging camp, wood, all of a sudden there's just not, there's just not enough raw resources for wood or lumber refinement. You can, you'll have to repurpose and kind of like navigate the economy because the prices will rise because demand is rising since there's such a relatively low supply. So this is what Matt is talking about in terms of like repurposing buildings. So being able to repurpose buildings will allow players the flexibility to take advantage of those opportunities. Any player created building can be repurposed into any other player created building as long as the repurposed building is able to be built on the same land plot. Through a process similar to upgrading a building. So this includes supplying a specified amount of various different resources and assigning worker cards to construct. Keep in mind, that's probably only going to be the base production again for those worker cards. The cost and time required is going to be different depending on how different the new building is from the old one, but will always be far less than building a brand new one from scratch. So the example that they give here is like, for example, the cost and time required to repurpose a lumber yard to a metal silo will be far less than a lumber yard to an alchemy lab, right? Just different kinds of, I'm assuming alchemy lab is what? Magical resources? Alchemy lab is, salt, legendary potions. So it's completely different, right? Rather than getting kind of natural resources from the earth of Praetoria, from the dirt of Praetoria. Let's see. Additionally, if a building is repurposed to be something very different than the original building, the repurposed building may be a lower level than the original building. So just something to keep in mind. And then finally, we'll close this out with castles and keeps, trifoil runes. As mentioned, trifoil runes are going to be the only things that are available or they will only be available through castles and keeps. So here's the information that we need to know, or at least is new information. Required research for scholars to study in order to produce research tokens. So people will still need research in the future. Now, we didn't talk about how research is going to be used as something that potentially unlocks things. I wonder if that's going to be, when they talk about resources to upgrade buildings, I wonder if research is going to be a part of that. But, I guess we'll have to wait and see. So like most resource, and it's also going to go towards the ancient ruins construction project. So this makes owning a castle keep quite valuable. Like most resource production, the amount of trifoil runes produced on a castle or keep building will be based upon the production of the worker cards, including all the normal boosts, runey totems, titles, as well as the levels of the building. So castles and keeps, similarly to the other ones, will have 10 levels like most other buildings and can be upgraded the same way. Castle and keep owners will also need to pay maintenance costs, like with other buildings, to prevent them from falling down a level. Castles will also have significantly higher trifoil rune production per level and worker production than keeps. So that's the difference there. Now here's an interesting thing. Please note the castle and keep buildings will provide storage space for trifoil runes, as there is no specific storage building for those. Please also note that castles and keeps are still planned to collect a portion of the taxes. I don't know if that's going to change, but I don't know if these specific numbers are going to change, but they're still going to be collecting taxes on top of producing a highly rare resource. So I guess I'm very grateful for the RNG for giving me a keep, but I'm curious to see how keeps and castles are looking on the market, if there's even any available right now. But yeah, so final thoughts on this before we close out, because I don't want this video to be like super long, or at least a lot longer than it already is. All these common land plots are going to get eaten up, right? In a way, because there's going to be so little of like every resource, whether it's raw or refined, that I actually think it's going to make, the kind of like game economy of land, right? So there's the game economy of Splinterlands, but then there's like the sub game economy of land. It's going to be so fascinating to watch, because it's just going to be like, whoa, there was a spike in lumber prices simply because of the fact that like a new player came in, or somebody wanted to change, their buildings, right? Or something like that. Or maybe they just want to like level up as quickly as possible. So you might get people then all rush into, repurposing their buildings to provide wood or lumber, whatever the case is. So as we go through, as it stands, the Splinterlands economy is always fascinated me because of how dynamic and complex it is. The land economy, which again is going to be a subset of the Splinterlands economy, is going to be even more complicated, and therefore probably even more fascinating for me once we get to phase 2. So, I was giving Matt a hard time, or I've given Matt a hard time on this channel, because he's just like, 1.5 is boring, right? And yes, 1.5 compared to 2.0 it's like night and day, right? 2.0, I understand like his vision where he's trying to go for. I don't know how all this is going to work, but I know that there are enough, fanatics here within the Splinterlands that are looking at this and salivating, because it's just like, ooh, I can't wait to see what I can produce with my land, right? I want to be able to like corner the market on something, or, I don't know. It's going to be fun. Obviously, a lot of the community members know each other. There's a good kind of like camaraderie here, or rivalry, however you want to look at it. And that's only going to be expanded more in land. People like land is going to be its own separate game where you'll be able to go and earn things. And the better you are at managing your resources, managing your time, the actual, digital resources that you have, or utilizing, different things for efficiency, that's going to be, it's going to be fun. So, I'm very excited for 2.0. I wish we had it now, but to be honest, and I guess I'll do a Papa Bear to close out the video just for old time's sake. When I read about the complexity of resources, when I read about the complexity of buildings, I know that 1.5 put in a ton of the back end code work, but I look at this and I'm just like, I don't know how long this is going to take. And I've said this before, like I don't have any confidence, and I'm not trying to like take anything away from Farpetrod or Matt or the team. I just don't have the confidence that this is going to be done in 2024. You know what I mean? Like there's just so much going on, and there's so much that they need to figure out. And then on top of that, as we saw with 1.5, there's going to be so much QA testing that needs to happen. I mean, if QA testing for 3 resources with 3 buildings was, took as long as it did, I can't imagine how crazy all of this is going to take. One, to plan it, right, which is what Matt is doing now. Two, to actually code it, and then three, probably most importantly, for QA to actually go through. And again, this is not a knock on anybody at part of that process. I'm just literally saying, I think for people who had the expectation that this is going to launch next year in 2024, because the 1.5 white paper kind of had this slated for Q1 of 2024. I just don't think it's anywhere close. Now, that being said, that does mean that there's probably some opportunity to, if there's going to be some lulls and whatever, where we will see, opportunities to go in and maybe snag a cheap plot, or, start planning out exactly what you want to do by, sniping the different plots off the market, or maybe grabbing a castle or a keep if they're available within your price range, because that's what you're going to focus on. So, ultimately, there's the next year, 6 to 12 months, we'll call it that, is going to be interesting to see how this goes. The last thing I'll say on this is my hope for what Matt has said in the past, and what I think was like the big mistake from 1.5, although I understand what they were doing. And what I hope that they'll correct with 2.0 is that you do release it in different iterations and phases. Now, is it possible? It's the more we read about it, maybe not, because it's just like, oh, okay, well, if people can start producing, raw resources on their land, that would be cool. But then what about storage buildings, right? That should also need to go live. And then, maybe refinement doesn't need to happen right away, but you're going to need storage buildings. You're going to need, raw resources, then refinement buildings, all this stuff. So it's going to be like the team, I'm sure the team would get a lot of flack for it too, because it's just like, we're going to focus on this aspect first, right? And then a month later, 2 months later, then this one's going to come out. A lot of people are going to look at that and say, well, I don't own that certain type of land plot, or I don't own certain things. So like, oh, of course you're going to focus on that because you own whatever. And again, I'm not saying that the team actually would be doing that. For them, they're not focused on like who it's benefiting. They're focusing on how easy it is implementation to get like steps 1, 2, 3 done, and ordering them in that way. But I do hope that they can do it. I do hope that they can find a way to get, aspects of this out in 2024, just because, like I said, it seems like there's so much going on with it that the full version of this, and again, this is only phase 2, right? So we haven't even talked about items and spells and all that, like the production of items and spells, which actually seems considerably easier than this, right? Because it's just like, oh, once the resources are all done, well, then we just have to design items and spells that require a certain amount of resources, and then the actual implementation of them in game is completely separate from land, right? That's probably going to be something like what Call Me Tim did for Rebellion, right? That'll be a completely separate process. So sorry, I know I've been rambling on a lot, but obviously very exciting stuff with land in the we'll call it distant future. But we can get excited now and hopefully take advantage of whatever opportunities there are for land at the time or over the next couple of months here. So that is all I have for you guys in this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Otherwise, I'll catch you all in the next one and see you around the game. Take care.